G'day battlers, and today we've actually got a bit of a special video because today we're going to be talking a little bit about team building in the Circus Cup, specifically how to pick your anti-fliers. So if you haven't seen my Circus Cup meta simplified video already, that video is going to help you understand kind of what roles you need to fill on your team as well as the general matchups in the cup. So you can click up there to watch that, or also in the description below. So I recommend watching that first and then coming back here. But yeah, from that video it's pretty clear that the flyers are super important and therefore countering them is just as important. So these 6 Pokemon on the screen are just some of the options, some of them more effective than others, but when building a team, how do you kind of pick which anti-fliers to bring in? And then in the tournament, how do you pick which ones you're going to bring onto your line of 3? Well, luckily, we can start to answer this question by taking a look at this infographic created by DrTrotter just for this video, so serious shout out to DrTrotter, who I don't think I'm wrong in saying is the largest Australian PvP Twitch streamer, so please go check out his Twitch channel in the description below after this video, and I'll talk more about that at the end because now we've got some anti-fliers to go through. So this infographic is pretty easy to understand. You've got your anti-fliers on the left and you've got your flyers along the top. A green circle means that it's a win for the anti-flyer, while a red circle means that the flyer is going to come out on top. And then there's yellow circles, which mean that it's not a total wipeout. There might be some play for both Pokemon, but the green outer rim is going to mean that it's in the anti-flyer's favor, and then vice versa for the red ring. So with that understanding, let's kind of first look at what we've got here and then start to dive into how we can use this information to, build your team. So first of all, every one of these guys is going to be beating Emolga. Obviously Emolga is an anti-flyer itself, so the fact that it has some counters isn't some sort of like dig against Emolga, it just does a slightly different role than the rest of the fighters. But yeah, they're all beating it. And as well as that, starting up the top with Bronzong, it's also beating Noctowl, Pelipper in both the Vanilla and Shadow Dragonites, and then it's going to lose the Drifblm because it has the Psychic typing, and then Skarmory's got a yellow circle there, so if Skarmory is going for Brave Bird at some point for like that bigger damage, then Bronzong will actually win in the 1 shield, but then loses in the 2 shield, whereas if they go straight Sky Attack, which your opponent might do if they've seen this video, it might win in the 1 shield, but loses in the 2 shield, and I say might because Bronzong would be going down with a Psyshock, like ready to go. So if there's the slightest bit of lag, Bronzong might still be able to pull it out and get that Psyshock off. But then there's Mantine, which as I mentioned in the meta video, it's a little bit bait dependent as Mantine needs to throw the first Bubble Beam, that gets shielded, and then land 2 Ice Beams to take down Bronzong in 1 shield. So even if you go for 2 Bubble Beams and then an Ice Beam, that essentially gives Bronzong the opportunity to get one last like knockout Psyshock before it goes down. It might be IV dependent, I'm not too sure, but it's a really iffy matchup. It could go either way. Everything with the Mantine kind of is, but then there's Hypno, who's pretty similar. It's got the confusion damage and then running Thunder Punch and Shadow Ball. It loses the Drifblm because again, it's got that Psychic typing. And Trotter does have Hypno losing to Skarmory here, and that's actually only if it lands Brave Bird, which is the standard PvP poke kind of how the matchup goes, but otherwise it's actually Hypno's game to win, just if he doesn't get that Brave Bird. So then there's Noctowl, who is, it's a really IV dependent matchup, so if you have a really good PvP IV Hypno, you might actually lose to Noctowl because you really want to hit a certain attack breakpoint that does like an additional confusion damage to Noctowl. It does 12 damage instead of 11, and that basically just secures the win for Hypno. So actually Dragonite is also only a win if it's the vanilla version. If they're packing Shadow Dragonite, Hypno will just barely lose out. But yeah, outside of the Drifblm, the confusion users are just really looking like good anti-flyers. And then there's Emolga, the anti-flyer plus flyer. It's pretty straightforward, beating all except for Drifblm and Vanilla Dragonite. It does beat Shadow Dragonite. The spammy charge moves just kind of fly through, I suppose. And then there's Drapion, who isn't the best anti-flyer, but it can certainly do some work. It's losing to Skarmory, even just straight Sky Attack, as well as generally losing to Mantine and Pelipper. I guess the water typing just kind of keeps it safe from the Ice Fang sort of deal. And then Noctowl is also kind of a close win, but Drapion does have it. Then there's Drifblm, who isn't a Pokemon that you're going to be seeing topping any sort of anti-flyer charts, but just like Drapion, it can do some things here or there. So it can beat out Skarmory if the Skarmory doesn't go for Brave Bird, but as far as the yellow circle for Mantine is concerned, I think it's more of a full red kinda, because Mantine can actually just go straight Ice Beam and take out the win in the 1 shield, but that is a matchup with both an Icy Winder and a Bubble Beamer, so in the course of the battles, really anything could happen. Drifblum's then very barely going to be losing to Noctowl, as well as Pelipper, and then it just beats Vanilla Dragonite, but then loses to the Shadow. So I'll tell you now, I probably wouldn't recommend bringing Drifblm on your team as any sort of anti-flyer. You could certainly maybe bring it for some sort of other coverage, and it does cover Emolga, which is going to be an important thing in this cup, but so can everything else on this graphic. But I'm getting ahead of myself because Magcargo first. So Magcargo is taking out Skarmory, Emolga, Noctowl, both Dragonites as well as Drifblm, and then it's losing to Mantine straight Bubble Beam and Pelipper with Water Weather Ball. So Magcargo's got a pretty good coverage across like everything except for those water flyers. So basically that is DrTrotter's infographic, and knowing all this information is, good and all, but how can we go about applying this knowledge to like our sort of team? So it's kind of all about a coverage game. So it's almost guaranteed that most teams in this cup are going to be having at least 2, maybe even 3 flyers, with the 3 main candidates in my mind being Emolga, Mantine, and then one of the other kind of 4, which most people are probably going to lean into that Skarmory, especially because it is ranked number 1 in PvP Poke, which tends to bring a lot of people flocking to whatever that may be. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be important to prepare for that by having 2, maybe even 3 Anti-Fliers in your team, so you can kind of consider coverage a little bit. Using this infographic, you can kind of figure out how different Pokemon cover each other. So Emolga and Drapion, for example. Emolga beats Skarmory, Mantine knocked out Pelipper, and then ties with itself. And then Drapion beats Emolga, knocked out Dragonite, and Drifblm. And all of the flyers are covered by at least one of those 2. So that's the kind of coverage that you want to see on your team, kind of. And I guess similarly, Magcargo and Hypno both are covering each other's weaknesses there. And actually, interesting with that one, Hypno's got Thunder Punch, so it's like super countering the 2 water types that are beating Magcargo. So maybe Hypno and Magcargo might be like the OP pairing. I'm not too sure, but you could also consider coverage that your team might already have in other Pokemon. So say you've got Typhlosion, for example, you've already got that one piece of Skarmory coverage, so you might be a little bit more comfortable leaning towards some of the Anti-Fliers that aren't as strong, like maybe Bronzong. And if the rest of your team like happens to beat Pelipper, for example, you can probably just feel way better about bringing Magcargo, that sort of thing. So with this cup being so heavy on the flyers and anti-flyers, you might also want to lean into Emolga a little bit, because it's able to fill kind of both of those roles at the same time, and plus it's spammy, which is always helpful. But say you've got your team, you've picked Emolga, Bronzong, and Hypno as your anti-fly coverage. Then comes to picking a line of 3 that you're going to be using against whatever they bring in. So the first thing you need to think of is, what flyers do they have on their team? Have they got a Drifblm? Because if you've got Drifblm, you probably don't want to bring in Bronzong or Emolga, so you might want to lean into the Drapion a little bit more. But maybe your opponent knows that. They're going to go, okay, they're going to have to bring Drapion, so I'm going to bring something that counters Drapion, like Skarmory. Or maybe you could then also bring Emolga, so you're bringing Emolga and Drapion, that double anti-fly coverage. Emolga's going to be covering the Skarmory, Drapion's going to be covering the Drifblm. Obviously, they aren't the perfect coverage for each other. They do cover each other, but if you land the Emolga up against the Drifblm, you might not be in a great spot, although Emolga's still going to do good there. But yeah, basically, it's going to be a little bit of luck. So this is obviously it's a random 3 that I've kind of picked to make an example. But really, it all comes down to building your teams of 6, and probably the most important skill of picking your line of 3. So that might be a discussion for another day. Maybe I could get some elite trainers on or something and talk about how they build teams, so we can maybe all learn a thing or two. Yeah, with all that going through, I do just want to say a massive thank you to DrTrotter for putting this infographic together, and also pushing me to do this video. So please do go ahead and follow the link in the description. Give his Twitch channel a follow, because he streams multiple times a week, Sylph content as well as GBL, so well worth the watch if you get a chance. And yeah, don't forget to like, comment, follow DrTrotter on Twitch, especially that follow DrTrotter on Twitch one. And yeah, thank you to my patrons, Let's9458, brajSF, Ben10, or new and your Yahwertle, SqeakyNL, and the newest supporter of the channel, charizardyong. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. From the bottom of my heart, I seriously do appreciate it, and I'll probably keep saying that, so yeah, thank you a lot. And yeah, also thank you to SadiePoo for making the Twitch emote, and Raid44 Maze for the 5 gifted subs, and Oscalicious for the sub. And that was a bang out there. I hope he hasn't been making sounds this whole video. That would be very unfortunate. Now the wind's picking up. I think it's just calling it time. Get off this video now. So yeah, I guess I will do that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next Circus Cup video.